Alright, this is meant to be a little bit of review on how to use the vector tools in order to create paths and shapes. So we're just going to jump into this. I'm going to start with the cloud up in the sky here. As you can see, this is not a standard shape. It's not a circle or a rectangle or a star pattern. So this is going to be a pin tool to create this shape. So with the pin tool you can create curves and straight lines. So what you want to pay attention to is up at the top, if you're creating a shape and not a path, you want to make sure that it's set to shape. Then the fill color can always be changed later, but if you want to change the color now, you can choose this and choose a color that's going to match. So I'm going to choose a nice cloud color. Stroke we will go over in a little bit. What I recommend having on is under this gear icon, the rubber band will kind of show you what your line would look like if you were to click for the next line. So with those settings, I'm ready to draw. I'm going to zoom in here to this first cloud. And it's fuzzy because the resolution is low, and that's why we're doing this. Is with the vector image, you can scale it up and scale it down. It's going to be nice and clear. So I'm going to click here to start, and when you click, you want to kind of have a plan how you're going to make this shape. So if you want to start a curve, you can click and then drag in the direction that the curve is going to go. And you can see how that's shaping that line. Now this next line that I'm going to make is going to be here. It's going to kind of create a little crux there. I don't have a very distinct line that I'm trying to copy, so I'm just kind of guessing. So now you can see this handle here, that little thing sticking out, is pulling my line away. You can see that with the rubber band, and it's pulling it the wrong direction. I want my curve to go this way, not down and around that way. So I need to get rid of this handle. So as I'm drawing, I'm going to hold the Alt key down and hover over that point, the previous point that I just made. I get a little caret symbol there. This allows me to delete that what I'm calling the leading handle. That's the handle that's in the leading edge of my line there. So I'm going to click, I'm holding down the Alt key and clicking on that point to get rid of that handle. So now I can draw, and you don't need to make a bunch of points along a curve. Basically, if it's one continuous curve, I like to click kind of in the middle of the curve and drag out my handles there. And this is going to all be edited later. I'll show you how to do that too. So if you don't get it perfect the first time, don't worry, we can change that. And then my next point is going to be about right here. And there's actually, I don't need to drag any handles. I already have the curve that I want. So I just clicked there for that point. So if you want to drag out handles to make the curve, you can, but this handle was already curving the line the way I want it to go. So I just clicked there to create a point. So that means this is a straight line. If I were to click out here, it would just be a straight line. I don't want that. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that previous step. And I'm going to click down here, which is where the curve ends. I'm going to drag a handle out. Now I need to get rid of this handle because it's curving the line, and I just want a straight line from here over to here. So I need to Alt click this point. Then to close my shape, I'm just going to click on the original spot. You can see that because I started with handles, it's actually curving this line down. So I'm going to next edit this shape. So if you want to edit, it's really easy. There's tools that allow you to select each point. You can reposition the points, you can change the handles. So the path selection tool selects the entire path Direct selection tool allows you to select each individual point on the path. So we're going to use the direct select tool, which is the white pointer, and select our path, and now you can see all the different points I have on here, and I want to edit this one specifically, and what I want to do is get rid of this handle. Now there's a way to get rid of both handles, but I want to keep one. Let's see if we can get rid of one. If I can click here, so I'm holding down the control key and the alt key, and I get that familiar caret symbol. I'm going to zoom in here. So I do control and alt, I get that caret symbol, which has something to do with these handles anytime you see that symbol. So I'm going to click here, and that removes both handles, and I have my straight line that I wanted, but it messed with this curve. So I'm going to just drag this out to get the curve that I wanted, and that was an easy edit. Now if I had other stuff that I wanted to do, let's say this was in the wrong spot, I could simply click this point, grab it just by holding click down, and move it over. There's a lot of other things you can do with this tool. You can add handles. So say I wanted these handles back. Again, that'd be a control and alt. Then I would click and drag out handles. Now the only problem with this tool is there is no way to just get rid of one handle. The only way to do that was when you were originally drawing it. You could get rid of the leading handle, but once you've added handles, you can't remove just one of them. You have to remove both or keep both. So let's say I wanted to keep this handle, but I didn't want this handle here. The only way to kind of get rid of it is to just move it all the way to the center of the point. And if you want to like zoom in, you can actually get a little bit more accurate. That's close enough, but it's twisting this thing the wrong way, so I just need to move this up. So the handle is still there, but it's just really, really small. It's right there. So I can zoom in and move it even more if I wanted to. So you get the idea. So one more thing with these paths. So let's say you need one, or either you have too many points or you need to add a new point. So to do that, if you want to edit the actual path for the shape, you're going to have to go back to the pin tool, but there's actually multiple tools that you can find within the pin tool. There's the freeform pin tool, which is really hard to use accurately. You can add an anchor point or delete an anchor point, or you can convert the point. So you can convert it from a straight line to a curved line, or vice versa. So if you want to add a point somewhere, you would use this tool and hover over your path, and there's a little plus symbol that appears there. Now you can click and add a point. It's adding it as though it was part of the original curve. So it adds handles for you, and then you can adjust those. So let's add another point down here. It automatically adds handles, and because this is a straight line, those handles are just lined up perfectly. So I'm going to undo that step. So if I want to remove a point, I can go to the delete anchor point, hover over the anchor point, and there it's removed. Now it did something wonky with my drawing. I'm not sure why it did that, but we're just going to undo until we get back to the way it was. That was a cloud. Let's go to a tree here, and this is going to help us learn a couple things. So again, this would be a pin tool shape. You can't make this shape with a circle or a rectangle. So it's a freehand drawing. So it's a bit of an oval, but it's egg shaped. So I'm going to click here to start, and I'm actually just going to click in the center of the top and drag out some small handles. That's going to curve my line. And the next point I'm going to click is actually going to be all the way at the bottom. My goal in this is actually to use the fewest amount of points as possible. It makes the smoothest line. If you start adding a bunch of points, then it makes the edge kind of jaggedy. So I'm actually pretty much done with this shape. I'm just going to click back here to close the shape. From this point, we'll call this the dark green tree. And now I'm going to change the color. There's a couple ways to change the color. Because my pen tool is set to shape, I can change the color with the pen tool. Or, because it's a shape, I can also go to the shape, which mine's set to line right now. So because it's a shape, I can go here and change the color as well. And if you want to quickly, let's say you're on a different tool, I'm on the move tool, and you want to quickly change the color, you can double click the icon for the shape layer and it brings up this custom color palette. That's close enough. Alright, so now I can either transform this shape by using these handles, or I could change the actual path. Since it's generally the shape that I want it to be, actually let me go to the path first. So I'm going to go to this direct selection tool, which is the white pointer, select my path for my shape, and what I want to do is change this curve to be a little bit larger, and actually I'm missing a handle on the other side, so I'm going to do Control Alt to get my caret. I clicked it one time to remove the handles. If I click and drag away, there we go. Just wanted to widen the top out a little bit, and then probably widen the bottom out a little bit as well. Alright, so I have a tree, and most of these are all shaped similarly. So to save myself some time, instead of drawing all of these trees, I can duplicate this layer. So I'm going to do Control J. I have multiple trees here. I'm going to now move this away using the Move tool. And let me just place it over this tree over here. And a lot of times while you're working, to make it easier, you can turn the fill color down so that you can see through the shape to get the right placement. So I'm going to shrink this down. That looks good. I'm looking at the center of this tree trunk as I stretch it out so I get it centered. So that's where I want it. So now I'm going to turn the fill color back up. And then I would change the color to match. So I have to click the check mark up here to accept the transformation changes. Then I'm going to double click to bring up my color palette here and then change it to something a little more yellow. There we go. Alright, so you get the idea. So you could repeat that process to make multiple trees. And the grass is actually very similar to the cloud technique. So you can get the little tufts of grass there. So let's focus on this tree trunk here. Now to do this, there's no way to do straight lines. You could do a rectangle, but this rectangle has a rounded edge on it. So I'm going to show you a little special trick. So with the pen tool, I'm not sure why. I'm just going to create a new path here. Alright, that is one thing about the paths. If you're creating a new shape and you want to include it in the current shape, you would have that path selected, or you'd have that shape selected as well. If you want a brand new shape, you want to make sure there are no layers selected. You can go to select and deselect layers. Now there's no path selected and there's no layers selected, so I'm creating a new shape layer because my tool is still set to shape. I'm going to change the fill color while I'm thinking about it to this dark brown. Actually, I'll use this even darker brown. And these are just straight lines. So what I'm going to do is click at the bottom and click at the top, and that's the end of my shape. Now the fill color is at this point it's not important. I can even set this to no fill. But what we want to do is add a stroke. And we're going to choose the color that we want. I'll go back to that brown. It's a little more natural. And now I can change the size of that line by changing the size of the setting here. So that's the size of the line, and then the pattern of the line is the next one. So if you wanted a dashed line, you can choose a dashed line. If you wanted a dotted line, you can choose a dotted line. We want just a solid line. And then the alignment is important. So if you want it to be aligned to the left of the line or to the right of the line, so inside or outside. Right now it's set to one of those. If you want it in the middle, so this would be centered on the line. See how it just centered itself? And if I want it on the other side, which would be the outside, I would click on this, it would move to the other side of the line. So I want the center. And then the next thing is the caps. So the shape of the end of the line. Right now it's set to be squared off. I want to change that to rounded. So it's rounded on both edges. So that's perfect. So I could repeat that same technique to make my other tree trunks, or I could copy this layer over. So let's say I wanted another one, Control J. Now I can move this one off to another tree. And I can change the length. And there you have it. A couple tree trunks. Alright, so we went over the clouds, we got a couple trees, we got the tree trunks here. Now these are going to be hidden by the grass. So again, this would just be a custom shape that you make with the pen tool. So let's just do that really quickly. And let's go ahead and choose a fill color. Alright, I'm going to choose to start in this upper corner. Now Control Spacebar is a good shortcut to know. That's the zoom tool. Then if you want to do the alternate, you'd hold down the Alt key. So Control Alt Spacebar, zoom out. Something you use all the time. Then to move your project around, you can use the hand tool, which is simply the spacebar by itself. So those are three really good things to remember: how to zoom in, Control Spacebar; zoom out, Control Alt Spacebar; and then to grab your project and move around in space, the spacebar is the hand tool. So I'm going to zoom in here, start at this point. This is a straight line, very easy. Over to here. Now I have a curve that starts, and I think I'm going to just click in the middle of this curve, drag out some handles. Then I'm going to choose to click over here, and we'll see what happens. So now I have a problem. Photoshop is closing my shape. There's really no way to avoid that because Photoshop, I guess, I don't know why, but it's forced to close a shape because you're telling it you're creating a shape. So if there's any way to close the shape, it's not a straight line, it's going to start filling in that shape with color. So now this is all in the way. So to get around that problem, I'm going to change my fill color to nothing. So it's basically invisible, which is going to help as I'm drawing so I can see the shape that I'm trying to make here. Now this is I need to make a sharper turn here, so I got to get rid of this handle. That's an Alt click on that point. And then I'm going to click about here. Actually, let's click here somewhere. This doesn't have to be exact because this is our interpretation of this drawing. I'm going to Alt click this because that's pulling my line the wrong direction. And I can actually just click over here, drag out handles, and make this curve. Again, I need to get rid of that handle. Alt click that, and then I can click here. Now there aren't enough points here, so I'm going to show you a quick tip. If you want to add a point, my settings up here are set to automatically add or delete points. So because I have this checked off, my tool will switch to the add an anchor point if I hover over any part of the path. And if I hover over an existing point, it will turn to a remove of the anchor point, so you get that negative symbol. So while I'm drawing, I can actually add more points. So I'm going to add a point up here. And while I'm creating this, I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I get that little caret symbol, which means I can grab these handles. And I'm going to have to use a combination of handles to get the right shape here. The Control key goes to the Direct Select tool. So I haven't moved off the pen tool at all. And I have all these edit tools available to me. So Control is the Direct Select tool. The Alt key, and you hover over a handle, gives you the ability to change the shape of the curves. And then Just hovering over the line gives you the ability to add or remove points. So those are all pretty good tips. So I need to get rid of this handle here. So I'm going to Alt-click. Whoops. There we go. And this is an S curve, so I'm going to click here before the S transition. And now that's pulling away, which is good. And I need a little bit more curve, so I'm going to drag out some handles. But now I need to get rid of this one. And I got a really steep curve going around here. So I'm going to have to click multiple times. Click here. And then maybe click over here. Get rid of this handle here. Click and drag away. Get rid of this handle here. Click here. Get rid of this handle here. And then on the last one I need to drag a handle away. I'm going to click and drag. There we go, we got our shape. If I want to, I can go back with the direct select tool and make some fine adjustments here. Try to get it more accurate. That's good. I probably need to add a point here, but for time's sake, we're going to say that's pretty good. So now that I have my shape, I can turn the fill color back on and choose color. That's not the exact color that I wanted. That's better. Alright, so I've got the clouds, we got the trees, we got the trunks. Same technique for the grass, for the clouds. And we've got this nice shape here. For text, I'm going to go through this. Now, if you find a font that matches, font itself is vector, so you can rescale text and it will be nice and crisp and clean on the edges. You can also convert text to shapes really easily, and shapes of course are vector images. So if you have the option to use an existing font and you can match it pretty well, that is the easiest. But in class we're going to try to do copy it ourselves, making shapes of letters. So the L would be really easy. Just using the pen tool, you're drawing straight lines. So first thing I want to do is draw out some guidelines here for the top and the bottom. Because this is so fuzzy, I kind of need this. Now I'm going to click to create my L shape. Let me do that again. Hold on. I'm going to start a different spot. If you want to draw a straight line, you can hold the Shift key down. It will restrict your cursor to 45-degree angles. So I want to draw straight down. I want to draw straight over. Up, over, up again, and close that shape. Now my fill color was on, so I had to kind of guess where that point was. So I could have turned this off to create the shape. So now I can adjust these points if I need to with the direct select tool. So let's say that's good. So moving on, now we're going to do the A shape. So for the A, I'm going to go back to this tool, and I'm going to be drawing just the outline. So let's say I wanted it to have a little bit of a top to it. So I'm going to click here, and let's see if there's an angle. No, I can't use a 45. So I'm going to click over here. Okay, there's my outline. So now I have a cutout here, and I'm going to use actually a fill color for this so you can see what's happening. So I want to create a shape, but I actually want to create the shape inside this shape, and I want to subtract that shape from the existing shape. So let me turn the fill color down a little bit. So I want to create a hole here. So I'm going to be changing the mode with which I'm drawing the shape. So right now I'd be creating a new shape. I don't want that. I don't want to create a new shape. I don't want to combine these shapes. I want to subtract. So I want to subtract the front shape from the shape underneath it. So I'm going to choose this mode, and then I'm going to draw a triangle. And you can see it's created a hole inside my shape. You turn the fill back up. So from this point on, I could adjust it if I made any mistakes. You get the idea. Alright, so I'd use a similar technique to do all of these. So the S is probably going to be the most difficult. It's being a combination of curves and straight lines. So let me do that for you. Alright, so if I was being really exact, it would take probably a lot more time to do this, and this should be lined up with the top line and the bottom line, so I have been mindful of that, so that changes everything. But you get the idea. So combining straight lines and curved lines to get the right shape. You can adjust it by just using the direct select tool and moving your points around and playing around with the handles. If you don't have the right tool, don't forget to try to use some of your modifier keys. So Control and Alt. I can move one handle separate from the other one if I wanted to. But most of the time you want to keep the handles connected. So it makes a nice curve. Alright, so the last thing that I want to go over is how to create a path for this cursive lettering and then stroke the path with the brush tool. So this is one continuous line that we're going to create, and then make sure I just deselect all the layers. And for this we're going to be using an actual path, not a shape. So I'm changing the tool from shape to path, and as you're drawing this, again, the fewer the points the better. It's going to make a more smooth line, and generally speaking you want to drag out handles in the direction that you would be moving your hand, not exactly in the same direction but in the similar direction. So, and then I'm going to drag one here. too extreme there, so I'll get rid of this handle. If you ever watch videos on YouTube, people that do this a lot, they get really good at it. It's kind of like drawing. So I want to go back. So if I were actually writing this, I would go around here and then come back around. So I need to get rid of this anchor point here, or not the anchor point, but the handle. And then I want to go back around. I'm going to pause for a minute and reposition that. And then I can click about right here. This is one of the hardest tools to learn. Once you learn it, it becomes really useful. So you may be stumbling around not knowing where to click. That's alright. Just try. You can always go back and redo it, or you can use the direct select tool and play around with the points and the handles to get it the way you want it. So this is too extreme here, so I'm going to get rid of this. This is not turning out great, but for the sake of time, I'm just gonna keep going. And let's say I have my last point over here somewhere. It's not exactly the same, but you get the idea. When you're done, you can click on the pen tool to stop, or like end the path. So right now I have a path that I'm working on here called work path. If I click on the pen tool, it's still selected and it's just no longer in drawing mode, and my cursor has an asterisk by it now, indicating if I were to click somewhere here, it would be adding more points to this existing work path, which I don't need any. But if this was a cursive word that had like a T that needed to be crossed, or if there was a broken part in this and I wanted to like basically pick up, if I were actually writing this, I would be picking my pencil up off the page or my pen or whatever I'm using and then start drawing again. That's how you would do that. So let's say I was done with this part of the name, but I had a last initial that I wanted to add over here, something like an S. So I'll just add an S here. Then I'm done with that part of the name. And let's say there was an I over here that it needed to be dotted, so I just make a little line here for a dot. Now that's all part of the same work path. Now if I deselect the work path, start drawing again, all of my work just disappeared. This is the problem with paths. If you don't name a path, it will just start a new path and it will get rid of your previous work. So once you've completed a path, like something that you want in the same path layer, you want to name that path. So I'm going to undo that step. And I'm actually going to get rid of my little I and my S here. So I want to name this path Eden. And right now it's not anything in my project. If I were to print this out, that would not do anything for me. Paths don't have any volume to them. They're just a path. So what you can do with a path is you can stroke it with a tool, usually a drawing tool, either a pencil or a brush. So the process of doing that is you're actually creating pixels. So you're physically creating colors that are mapped to the current resolution. That's not vector. I'll go through the steps of going from pixels to vector in just a minute. So the first thing you want to do is figure out what kind of brush do you want to use to recreate this hand-drawn cursive name or whatever. So the brush tool is what you want to focus on, and creating a new blank layer is really useful. That way you can play around with your brush before you do anything. So right now I can see on my screen the basic shape and size of my brush, and it's going to paint with the foreground color. So you could either leave it black or you could change it to whatever you want it to be. So I'm going to try some sort of dark brown. So I'm going to just go ahead and paint a little bit so I can see what this brush would look like. I don't really want this kind of a brush, or that size is too big. So I need to go into the properties for the brush. So you could access that here, or usually over here the properties panel there's the same icon. You can go into the brush settings, and here's where you'd choose the shape of brush that you would use. So some of them are really bristly, some of them are really full, and the ones that are just circle have this, just basically a line pattern with a rounded edge. So I'm going to choose something just simple that would represent some sort of handwriting. Say, let's use this one. And from here you can change the number of bristles. The length of the brush kind of changes the shape a little bit, but not really on this one. The thickness, stiffness, and the angle of the brush, which would be the angle that you're holding the brush. So if it was like a fanned out wide brush, it would have like a calligraphy effect like you're seeing here on the page. Okay, so now I've got this brush. So that's kind of what that would look like. Now for this writing, it's a little bit small, so I'm going to increase the size. That's about the right size. I'm going to increase it just a little bit. Let's just use a round number, 50. Alright, now I'm ready to stroke the path. So this blank layer that I just played around with is garbage. So I'm just going to drag this into the little trash can. I'm going to start over with a new blank layer. So layer, new, and then I'm going to just name this Eden. And now I'm ready to stroke a path. So in order to do that, I need to select a path first. You can just simply click on the path and then right click. I think you can right click the path itself. Yes, you can. You can either do that from there, or since there's a path on the page, if you use the direct select tool or even the path select tool, you can actually right click in the project and choose stroke path. So there's a couple ways to get to the stroke path option. So once you find it, you click on it, and it's going to ask which tool do you want to use. And you've got all these different tools you could use, but most likely you're going to be using the brush or the pencil tool. So I'm going to use the brush tool and click OK. And then Photoshop has just traced that outline. I'm going to, just so you can see all of this work, let's go ahead and place a layer and then fill it with white. Okay, so this is what I've created so far. It's not super perfect. This brush tool is not great after seeing it. So if you don't like what you just did with the layer and the stroking the path, you can start over. You just delete that layer and then find a different brush. Say, go back to the brush tool. Let's just say I want to use a simple circle brush with 100% hardness. Whoops. And you need to have a layer to draw on. So I'm going to go to New Layer. And this looks approximately the right size. So I'm going to go ahead and try my luck at stroking the path. There we go. That's not bad. Alright, so this is pixels. If I were to shrink this down, there we go, shrunk it down, and then scale it back up. Now it's all blurry. That's because this is not a vector layer, it is actually pixels. So once you shrink it down, it changes, it basically just becomes smaller. And then if you ever go to scale it up again, it's losing detail on the edges. So that's what we're trying to avoid with creating vector images. So the way to change this, I'm just going to go back to the original, is I'm going to select the pixels in this layer. So I have my brush tool and it's created this nice handwriting here. So I'm going to select that. So I'm going to right click the actual icon for the layer and choose select pixels. Now I have a selection here, and what I'm going to do is convert this selection to a path. To do that, I have to go to the Paths tab, and then there's some buttons down here related to paths. And what I want is this one. If you hover over it, says Make Work Path from Selection. So you click on that button, and you have a new work path. So I'm going to rename this Eden Outline. And now this is actually a vector boundary. It's basically a shape, but it's not filled. It doesn't have any kind of fill to it. So let me go ahead and hide. That's the actual layer. So my path is just an empty container. Now you can fill this, but it's not an actual shape. Actually, it's not allowing me to fill the path. Let me see if I select it. Yeah, it's not allowing me to fill it for some reason, but that's good. I don't recommend filling a path. You want to convert a path to a shape. To do that, I'm going to right-click the actual path and then choose Define Custom Shape. Now you can name this shape whatever you want to. I'm going to name it Eden. And now I have a custom shape that I can use. It'll be found in the Shape tool. So I have the shape tool selected, and it's a custom shape. If I look through my list of custom shapes, which I have a lot of them, it should be the last one in the list. So this will act like any shape. Now I can draw my shape in here. I'm going to hold the shift key down to make sure that it's constrained the proportion size. And I'm going to try to match the original size and placement. That's really close. I'm going to release right there. Alright, so now I have a shape that is a vector image. I'm going to get rid of my the layer that I created with the stroking. Now this shape can be transformed. It can be sized down and sized up, and it won't lose that nice clean line. So I'm going to go to select and deselect layers so you can see how nice and clean that edge is. If I go back and transform this shape, say make it really small, accept that transformation, and I go back and resize it back up. Is still nice and crisp and clean lines. So that is the goal for this project, is to recreate a logo using all vector components so it can be resized and not lose any of its resolution or clarity.